Hey guys, TommyBryson here, and today I'm going to teach you exactly how to actually create a time budget. And by the way, no, this is not a schedule budget, how to basically use your mornings and your afternoons. It's not that. It's a real legitimate budget, okay, with money and income, your expenses. But there's a twist to it, which is basically I'm also going to add a section for how much time it costs you to make that much money or to spend that much money, okay? It's something that most people don't consider whenever they actually make a budget, but in all honesty, it's super important, okay? And by the way, budgets are unique. And budgets basically allowed me to pay off $75,000 in debt, over $20,000 in student loan debt. Also allowed me to actually grow an investment account of over 6 figures, and also allowed me to be able to today spend less than $1,000. So budgets are amazing. They make those things possible. And yes, budgets are also personal. So my budget might be different from yours, and it's all based on taste, but at the same time, it's the same exact thing, okay? So for example, my wife, she loves shrimp. I can't stand it, okay? I think it's disgusting, okay? But at the end of the day, shrimp is what? It's food. And food is used for what? For energy. And at the end of the day, a budget, you might change a few things here and there, but it's used to try to control your spending, to try to control your expenses, to try to basically know your income, and to get you started when it comes to investing and growing your money. So it's not really gonna be that different. You can use this video. You don't have to be extreme like me. Just take the parts you actually like and leave the parts you don't like, okay? So let's get right into it, and do me a favor and actually like this video. Now, the very first thing we wanna look at when we're looking at a time budget is going to be our income. So first things first, okay guys? So income is going to be right here. And you also wanna put in, for example, type of income, and then you want to put in, for example, time. All right, so there you go. That's the only 3 things you actually need. I'm gonna basically do this. I write very ugly, by the way, in case you don't understand, but I'm actually trying to write pretty, okay? So my income per month is about $4,000, okay? Type of income is active because it's like an office job. And then the time it takes me to actually make $4,000 a month is about 160 hours or 40 hours a week, all right? So that's going to be 160 hours per month. And by the way, you can even go, for example, a little deeper and say, well, how much is that per hour, okay? Pretty easy to calculate. So if it's basically 4,000 divided by 160, that gives you $25 an hour. All right, so slash $25 an hour or whatever. Okay, there you go. That's basically it. Now there's another income that I actually have. Okay, I have income that's actually passive. It comes from stocks, and from here I actually make about $500 a month. Now, how much time does this actually cost me? The answer is nothing, because I just have, for example, in this example, $75,000 invested, and this $75,000 that I actually have invested at an 8% return makes me about $500 per month. So how much is that on a time level? Well, the answer is pretty simple, okay? So if I'm actually making $500 a month, multiplied it by 12, $6,000 a year. Now, if I divide that by 25, that's going to be around 240 hours I save every single year. So divide that by 12, that basically means, hey, that's 20 hours. So over here on the time section, I'm putting in, for example, minus 20 hours, because that's how much time it actually saves me, which is actually pretty awesome. On top of that, I have another source of income, and that's going to be real estate. I have an apartment worth around $60,000, and that makes me about $250 every single month at a 6% return. So again, I'm gonna put in here, for example, $250 a month. It's also passive. That means I don't have to actively work at it. It is real estate, so put it in there. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Can't really write all that in. How much time does it save me? Well, what's half of 500 is 250. Half of 20 is 10, okay? Math is not that hard. So I'm saving also 10 hours, right? So when you actually lock this in, well, what is my income every single month? The answer is going to be about $4,700. Well, yeah, there you go. About $4,750. That is the total income I have every single year. And again, you could say, well, I only work 160, but I save 20 and 10, like 30 hours every single month. The answer is yes, but you're still really working 160 hours. Now, if you could actually say, hey, since I don't have to work to make that money, I could just work, for example, 1 week less, and that way save more time. But that's later on. We're gonna talk about those things, okay? So that's the first part of this time budget, okay? It's basically the income factor. So now let's get into your expenses. And by the way, people like to say my expenses are different. No, this is what I call a bare bone budget, okay? Also, along with the time factor, because your expenses are pretty much the same as everyone else, okay? So right here, I'm gonna write down bare bone budget, or you can put it like, for example, like essentials. All right, it's not that crazy. But what is the expense? What is the type? And on top of that, the dollar amount, and over here is going to be time. All right, so over here, what do we have here? Let's look at the 4 main expenses we actually have. So we have shelter. Shelter is an expense that everyone basically has. It's basically house, where you actually live. You can't negotiate that. Now, my recommendation is make sure your home payment or your rent is no more than 33% of your monthly income. Now, in this example, I'm spending about $1,500 when it comes to rent. So right here, I'm gonna put in $1,500, and this is a type. It is a need because I actually do need this. Time. How much time does this cost me? Again, my time is worth about $25 an hour. So when I grab this calculator and put in, hey, I spent $1,500 on rent, and I divide it by 25, that's about 60 hours it's actually costing me to actually rent this place. Is that a lot of money? The answer is yes. It's a lot of time. Imagine that. You spend working about a week and about like 3 days or so to actually be able to afford living in this apartment. Then you have, for example, utilities. Utilities are really necessary, obviously. We have water, electricity, gas, internet, and phone bill. When you add up all those things, it's going to be about $500 for my budget, okay? And yes, it is obviously a need. And how much is that actually costing you? Well, again, let's just do the math real quick. 500 divided by 25 is 20 hours, right? So about 20 hours. Now, check out the cool thing, guys, here, okay? If you notice here, this utility bill is basically being covered now by my passive income that I actually make from stocks. Isn't that awesome? Okay, so the more you invest, the more you can have your investments cover parts of your budget, which is actually pretty awesome, okay? But let's move on here, okay? Then we have our next bill, which is going to be food. Now, I do most of my cooking at home, and I put in here, for example, this is obviously a need because if you don't eat, you die, about $500 also. And that's costing me how much? At the same time, 20 hours. Now, there are ways to save money on your food bill. I'll get into that later, but let's keep going, okay? So far, we have one last one, which is going to be transportation, which is big for a lot of people, but not big for me. This is a need. Now, the cool thing about my transportation bill is that I only pay gas, insurance, and maintenance, but I don't have a car payment, which is actually pretty awesome. And that's going to be about $300. I should probably fix this because this is not even readable by me. I forgot what I put there. Yeah, but there you go, $300. Now, how much is $300, guys? Well, again, in time-wise, it's going to be 300 divided by 25. That's about 12 hours, okay? So 12 hours of my time is actually costing me. Now, here's the crazy thing about this, guys, okay? You actually want to go ahead and sum this up. So the sum total is going to be about $2,800, and the sum time is actually costing you is about 120 hours, if I'm not 112 hours. 112 hours is actually costing you. Now, before I actually get into what you need to do next, here's an example I actually want to put here. This budget is very conservative. I know someone just watched this video today. He bought a Tesla. It's a guy here on YouTube. He bought a Tesla, and his payments between the payment on the car, the insurance, and the maintenance is about $1,000 every so month. And by the way, a $1,000 car payment is about 40 hours every single month. And over the life of the loan, which is usually about 5 years, it'll cost you about 2,400 hours. When you actually consider things that way, you kind of say, hey, is this actually worth all this time for me to say I'm having fun and I deserve this? No, you're basically spending time you don't need to spend on something that loses a bunch of value. It doesn't make sense. The good thing about not having a car payment is that you actually own it, and your cost is not going to be that high, and you don't have to worry that much about it, okay? So overall, that's the expense. The second thing you actually want to do here is going to be calculate the difference, okay? What is the difference going to be? Well, you have an income up here of about $4,750, and you want to subtract it from your expenses, which are about $2,800. So minus $2,800, and what do you have there? You have a difference of about $1,950. All right, so the difference is going to be $1,950, and that's going to be a positive number. For some people, when you actually do this budget with your real income, your real expenses, this number might be negative. That sucks, but it is fixable. Now, here's how you actually work on fixing this, okay? Because it's also very important. There's some room here to play. For example, you can have miscellaneous expenses like fun and subscriptions and so on. And that would be like about like $300, for example, for this person. But my idea, guys, you want to be very careful when it comes to having too much frivolous things in your budget that you don't need, especially when you're broke. Because when you're broke, you got to be real serious about your finances. You don't have the pleasure or the luxury to actually just be having fun all the time. You want to avoid that, okay? You want to be very careful. But I would set aside about like 5% of your income to have fun. That way, you have some room in there to actually play around. I chose the number 300. So right here, for fun, I can do this, minus 300, minus 300. That's still going to be about $1,650. That is still a pretty good number, and it is still positive, okay? So that is awesome. Now, how and what can you actually do with this budget to actually manage it better? Well, what you want to remember is this, okay? When you look at this budget, what I want you to start thinking about is that time is money. Whether you are on the income column or whether you are, for example, on the expense column, guess what? It is still costing you time to actually earn money, and it's also costing you time to spend money because you're spending the time you actually earned, right? The money you actually earn costs you time. So here's the first idea. The first idea is you want to start replacing your active income, right? You can do that by investing more money in passive avenues, whether it's real estate, whether it's into stocks, whether into a business, or whatever it is, okay? That's one way to go about it. So the less time you actually need to actually work because you have more money to cover your expenses, well, you're going to be better off. But here's something else, guys, okay? When you go to the expense column, which is super important here, look at your food bill, right? So what would be one goal? Well, the answer is we know that if we were to invest about $75,000 in the stock market, we can make about $500 a month. So that would cover, for example, your food. Another $75,000 would cover, for example, your utilities. Another $60,000 or $50-something thousand will cover your transportation bill. Now, to actually get to a number to cover your shelter, it would be a lot of money. Remember, if you're trying to make money from passive income, that basically means you need to have a lot of capital. That capital generates money, and that money covers your expense. But, okay, if you're able to actually lower your food bill, you need less money. Basically, you need to work less hours. Now, if you're able to get your home paid off or buy a home and pay it off, for example, in 15 years or 10 years, that means basically in 10 years, hey, you no longer have to work 60 hours. Now you only need to work, for example, let's say 8 hours to cover, for example, the insurance, the maintenance on the home, and so on, all right? That makes a big difference. Now, on top of that, your utilities, your food and transportation bill are usually going to stay around the same. But one big thing is stay away from debt, all right? That's going to make a big difference. So what I love so much about this time budget is that basically it put things into perspective. So when I'm making money, I'm just not like, hey, this is making me so much money. I'm also saying this is costing me time. And when I'm spending money, for example, on a fancy home that I can't afford, I'm saying, hey, this is costing me about a week of my time every single month to basically live here. It's kind of crazy. So what's my goal? What's my objective now? My objective is to get this thing paid off. That way, I don't have to work those hours. So once you get, and if you guys want a video about what to invest into and what to buy and so on, let me know. I'll work on that. But the goal is that once you get to a point where you need to work, for example, let's say instead of having to work 160 hours, you only need to work like 40 hours, actually do that. Go part-time. And that way now you have a lot more free time and you have a lot more enjoyment. Okay, guys, this is a bare bone budget mixed with a time budget. I hope it gives you perspective, and this way you know exactly what your income is and what your income costs you to make, what your expenses are, and what your expenses actually cost you on a time level, okay? Remember, your rate of time per hour or whatever is going to be usually whatever your salary is every single year, just divided by 2,000. That gives you like a rough average per hour basis of what you actually earn, all right? So that's the idea. But if you work minimum wage and you're making like 15 bucks an hour, then just divide your 15 bucks an hour by your expenses and also know exactly how much it costs you to make the money you're actually making. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time. And as always, peace. Subscribe to the channel, by the way.